Lancashire, where certainly in East Lancashire, where we sat, the typical council tax bands are Band A, that we have a low council tax base and we are particularly hard hit by these council tax increases. And then just on the IT and the cross-border issue, the issue that I raise is police control rooms communicating with each other, not an open reach it'll be, and the issues of mobile phone masts. It's the control room communication from force to force.
Again, we'll pick that up and happy to provide a briefing on that, Councillor Whip, in terms of the work that's being done with the neighbouring forces through control room, and if there's any areas that we've missed or need further work, always an open book. Yes, the way that the council tax funding is weighted is such that obviously areas that have a lower Band E council tax base obviously find it harder to raise the money. There is a weighting within the funding formula that accounts for Band E council tax base. So I will turn to my Chief Financial Officer to correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that it is in the region of around 20 million that we receive as a supplementary because of our Band E council tax base in terms of the weightings that are within the funding formula that we would lose on the funding formula if it was removed.
Well, the last time that they tried... the last time that the funding formula was reviewed, which is now in the third phase of being reviewed yet again, we found that if they did make that adjustment, it would have been in the region of £20 million. But it dates back to when the funding formula was first created back in the 90s, and ceilings and floors were put in to dampen the impact of any change, which related to the issue around council tax base. So there has certainly been a reflection of that tax-based position for Lancashire in that formula, but that formula is 20-odd years old now, so I mean the impact will be significant if it were removed. To say how much of it is still actually exactly the same now as it was then, I wouldn't like to guess, to be perfectly honest.
Okay, we do have a queue of people. Yes, please, and then, yep.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Andrew, for your report. Very comprehensive. And just from the outset, I'll be saying I think it's a reasonable request and I'll be supporting it. But in preparation for coming to today's meeting, I think you may know what I'm going to ask. I obviously am representing the South Ribble Borough Council, and I always ask people about the police, the reputation, which is very, very important. It's a much valued service in all the communities in South Ribble. But there has been a particular case, and I just want to make this point, please, to you. It took 7 years to get to this case. It's still not resolved. There's an IOPC investigation into the case, which last Friday was in both the press and the news, about a 15-year-old child who was killed in Penwitham, in Whitestake, in South Ribble. Now, because of the circumstances, and I understand, and I know we've discussed it before, when I go around and talk to residents about the good job which the police are doing, and there's a lot of people supporting obviously the police and that service, this is the one thing which comes up. So I urge you, I'll be supporting this, I'll be supporting what you do in terms of the role you do as the Commissioner, but this issue needs to be resolved, please. I'm just making a plea today for us to meet and get this one resolved, because the community is definitely being affected by what's happened. So if you don't mind, thanks, Andrew. Cheers.
Thank you very much, and we'll continue to pick it up with yourself, and there are more broad concerns from senior police officers and commissions around the length of time some IOPC investigations take to happen and the impact that has on public confidence, and that's a discourse that's in the public domain, because 7 years to get a resolution on a death is just not acceptable.
Okay, Alistair, and then...
Thank you, Chair. Two-part question, if that's okay. The first part is just regarding the investment, the digital investigations team, 200,000. I'd imagine that's only going to pay for 2 or 3 people. Is that sufficient? Because I'm sort of hearing internally that the digital investigations are getting a lot busier, but they don't feel they are perhaps getting the resources they require to deal with what they're having to deal with. So, you comment on that first, and then I'll ask the second part, if that's okay.
Absolutely, yeah. We've already grown the size of the team, so this is an increase again. These are very, very specialist roles, so actually the team is quite small. So whilst 2 or 3 people might not sound a lot, if you're in a team of 8 people, that's a 30% increase in the resource that you've got. So these are some really key specialist roles that the team think they need. Again, this is part of a medium-term plan, and I think digital investigations and digital capabilities will feature throughout the medium-term financial forecast as the nature of crime changes, and we need to match our resources. The other thing I would say to that is these capabilities are incredibly hard to come across, and we're competing with security companies, banks, all others who want people who've got those digital cyber skills in terms of security services, and actually realistically getting lots of these people is incredibly difficult. And I remember this back when I worked at the university. We appointed a professor in this field for them to only last about 9 months and have their salary doubled by a bank in the US to work from home. And that's the market we're in.
Noted, although I am told that Central Lancashire is now a hotspot for people working in that industry, so put your feelers out in that area, which I'm sure you're doing, and that's where your office is located, so it should work. The second part is converse to that, so I'm arguing to perhaps put more money back in on digital work, but overall, the savings that you'd identify of circa 6 million through the year on a budget of nearly 400 million, depending whether you include the provisions made for energy last year, are only showing savings of 1 to 2%. Now, I view that as quite conservative with a small c to try and make those savings when many councils having to make savings of 10, 15% and higher and being actively pushed by the government to do that. Do you want to comment on that at all?
As you'll be aware, we've had some quite high savings targets in recent years for the constabulary. We've only just put in place this last financial year the target operating model, which delivered quite a lot of the last chunks of savings. To be honest, given the conversation we've just had about sustainability and letting it lie a little bit, I want to see what the new target operating model delivers. There may be more savings that fall out of that more broadly for the constabulary in subsequent financial years. What we've set out is something that I think is an achievable target for the constabulary to deliver those savings off the back of having delivered, as councils have, I accept, many years of savings. And that's what I think is the reflected position of what we can do without creating disruption. I think a lot of the investments that we're making now will deliver further savings further down the line across the forecast over the medium term financial forecast as well.
Okay, noted, but I would like personally to see higher savings put on the service generally, in line with other local government and public sector operations.
Thank you. Yes.
My question is just quite simple, and I might have missed something, but why only Band D? Why not other bands?
Sorry, it's just the way the council tax is calculated. We calculate it on what the cost is per Band D property. So it'll be less and more for a Band E and F. So it goes up by a different amount it's a percentage. So 4.75 is £11.95 for a Band D. It will be a different amount for all the others. But for transparency, we're just asked to say what it means for a Band D property.
Band D, okay.
So we're all comparing apples with apples. Right. So you've not got one force saying it's only £3.40, but that's because they're declaring it against a Band A, and another force saying.
Right. I understand. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. I've got to say I was pleased with the way this has been done, that it wasn't, we can get £13, what can we do with the £13 increase and so on. That difference, the £1.05 from the 11.95 that that's proposed, what is the actual quantum for that? What does that equate to? And I've no problem at all if I think Ian may be able to answer that a little.
It's around the £1 million mark, isn't it?
It's
Half a million.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Green.
Thank you. Commissioner Snowden, thank you for the budget, which I've read with interest. I welcome a number of proposals that you're putting forward, particularly the work on the roads, particularly the hotspots programme to tackle antisocial behaviour, and the additional funding for neighbourhood policing teams. But whilst it's obvious how you're going to target on the hotspots, but on the neighbourhood policing teams, how will you target where those resources are allocated to?
Going back to Councillor Whip's earlier point, the actual the deployment of those neighbourhood officers will be at the discretion of the Chief Constable based on demand. And based on where he thinks that can have an impact, and or she, depending on, obviously he or she, depending on whoever is successful in the future of becoming the next Chief Constable. The budget is agreed with the Chief Constable, so we have agreed in principle that the way to deliver the police and crime plan, or one of the ways to deliver the police and crime plan, is to generally increase the size of our neighbourhood policing teams by 60 officers, an additional 60 officers over the next 3 years. We also have a programme behind that around increasing the size of specials and getting the PCSOs back up to full strength, given many have joined the regulars. How they will then be deployed, I would be facetious if I was presenting it any other way, will be a matter for the Chief Constable, and he will be held to account to me, on how effective that delivers the neighbourhood policing within the county. But what we will say is we have the police and crime plan. We've said that every area of Lancashire should have dedicated neighbourhood policing teams. We've put that extra money in for hotspot patrolling, and what we will want to see is that general increase across the board of the number of community beat managers operating CBMs, the officers who are dedicated and named for areas across the county, to reduce the size of the patches of each of the CBMs. That's the current plan for what they would be used for over the medium term. So hopefully they can be then more visible in their communities.
Yes.
Yeah, just a quick supplementary from it. Thank you for that response. How do you then plan to communicate to residents, communities, etc., that say, oh, we don't have as big a presence here of policing teams as another area within the same borough or the neighbouring borough or whatever? And the simple fact could be that the crime levels don't justify that size of team, but it's a difficult message to get across. So how do you propose to do so?
That's a lot of work that we've been doing with building up the engagement of the communications of local policing teams. Whilst broad strategic communications, either from myself or from the broader Lancashire Constabulary, do have an effect, we find actually that the Constabulary gets most of its positive engagement by South Ribble Police communicating in the South Ribble area about what they're doing. And rather than comparing areas with areas, I think actually people will view the police by what they see on a day-to-day basis, and therefore actually how local policing teams communicate about how they're addressing the area, the issues in that area, is the key to success here, rather than trying to say, well, you've got 7.3 and you've got 8.4, but that's because of these different crime stats. It's more important that the police, for me, are being seen to address the issues that matter to residents.
Okay, we do still have quite a queue. Councillor Townsend.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to come back to the council tax, but first of all, I'd like to thank you for your report, and I welcome certainly the investments that you're making, and appreciate the work that you've done on savings. Although I do agree with Alistair that it does seem quite limited and conservative with a small c in terms of what's actually been achieved there. But coming back to the council tax, you're proposing a 4.75% increase, which by anybody's stretch of the imagination is inflation busting. And there's form on this. I haven't been around all the time, but just going back to 2021, the Band D was £226.45. And basically, you're looking at this year, £263.40 for a Band D. That's a 16.3% increase over 3 years. Now, does anybody out there on the streets believe they've had a 16.3% increase in value of policing on the streets? I think that would be a hard stretch and a hard case to make. But more than anything, this is becoming unsustainable on people's pockets. It's just cannot be continue in this vein going forward. And I've just done some quick scribbles here, looking at the numbers as you went through them. And I'm not quite sure that all the options on trying to relieve at least some of the pressure on our residents have been explored. And I'd like your comments when I've finished on this. When I look at general reserves, This year, you're talking about 17.71 million general reserve against a budget of 394 million, which is 4.5%. Last year, in the similar type report, under the heading of robustness of the budget and adequacy of reserves, 4% was seen as adequate of the net revenue budget. So there's been a 3.245 million increase in reserves from last year. They were 14.46 million, and this year it's 17.71. So you've managed to bank some money this year. That is money I believe could go back into council taxpayers' pockets instead of leaving it in basically the police bank account. Even if you just restrained yourself and kept the level of reserves in comparison to the net revenue budget at 4%, which was seen as adequate last year, that would release 1.95 million and close your 5.55 million gap by 1.95 million, and you'd be able to reduce your council tax increase to below inflation. And I don't, for the life of me, know why you haven't done that. You seem to have been, your first option is let's go to the council taxpayers again, when actually you're banking money from obviously perhaps operational savings this year, and to me that's taxpayers' money, and we should be, if we can, giving it back to those taxpayers. I can't support this budget. That council tax increase is too high. So I won't be supporting it today, but I'd like your comments on really why you can't go back to the drawing board and have a look at utilising some of those reserves to offset this council tax increase. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Townsend. In terms of restraint, we were given flexibility by the government to go up to £13, which we haven't. The easiest thing for anyone to do in my shoes would just be to bank the full £13 and take the money and bury it in various bits of the budget, but I don't believe in doing that. And what we've tried to do is create a balanced budget that arrives at a very specific number. If we were to basically recruit additional police officers as part of the investment programme on this, based on drawing from reserves, we would be setting an unbalanced budget, and we would basically be in a position where we would be recruiting police officers that we would potentially have to make redundant the following year, because we would not be able to draw their salaries recurrently from reserves. And the issue that we have is that if, and I'm not sure that anyone would disagree with me around this table, we want to basically set budgets that don't make any cuts to officer, PCSO or specials numbers. That reduces the scope of where we can go for savings in this budget to much less than half the budget that we're looking at. If we're saying that the police front line is protected, that wipes out a huge amount of the budget to go anywhere else for savings. We're then looking basically at back office functions that have been the subject of trying to make savings for a long time. And that's where we are. And I could not, in my view as Commissioner, present to a panel with my hand on my heart saying I was investing in increasing neighbourhood policing into the medium and long term, but I'm doing it on the credit card. I could not do that because it would basically be creating a debt for tomorrow. And basically we would have double the number of issues when we were looking at it next year, because we can't build investments, we can't build long-term sustainable investments in increasing the police front line by drawing it from reserves. And in terms of the reserves position, this exact police and crime panel agreed the reserves position, which is that it should be between 3 and 5%, which is lower than many of the local authorities represented around this table who have much higher percentage of reserves in the bank than the police force does. We are not an outlier in Lancashire in the percentage of reserves position we have. In fact, it is much lower and much more restrained than a lot of the public sector organisations in Lancashire, many of which are represented around this table. And I, as Commissioner, I might not be here, I might be here in a few months. It could be a different conversation then if people want to set the budget based on taking it out of the bank. But I will not present investments to this panel that are not built in, baked into the budget and will be delivered for the public.
Thank you. We do have a couple more questions. Could I just ask a question? So based on the increase in neighbourhood policing teams, does that mean that Operation Centurion will stop being based on overtime, or will it just stop?
I would want to see both. We would have an even bigger pool of officers to draw from. So my view would be that actually having really intensive operations in antisocial behaviour hotspot areas is a good thing. And yes, we need to increase the number of neighbourhood officers that can do a lot of the long-term work and reduce their workloads by them having smaller areas. But in terms of having whole teams walking the beat, 3 or 4 shifts a week, that's requires the drawing in of hundreds of officers from across the force, which is always a good thing, because what we're then doing is bringing in officers from other areas, from CID, from response on their days off. The take-up rates are really high. It's really popular with officers. And that's why we'd continue to do it. And also because we're getting £1 million a year off the government to pay for the other bit of it.
Well, and I understand that, but why, if it's such a great thing, which it is a great thing, why does it have to be based on overtime?
Because it's only a fraction of an officer's salary. So to have that number of officers permanently walking the beat and to recruit them all, we probably need another 200 or 300 officers.
Okay, thank you. Yes. Yes, sorry. I'm squinting.
Thanks very much, and I'm largely supportive of everything that you've said, and thank you for the presentation. A thought occurs that we've just done a piece of work on children's homes. Now, we have a very perverse situation in Lancashire in that we have 4 times as many children's home places as we have children in need of care. And we can't get a good portion of our children in care into homes in Lancashire because they are bought by other authorities. Now, when those other authorities buy those children's care home places, they fund the care home places and nothing else. And we know that quite often there are times when police resources are needed to find missing from home children. Filed in one shift, we had children missing from home from Nottingham, from Kent and from Tyneside. It might not have added to the burden, but it took all of the police resources on that shift to find those children. What is the appetite for trying to get extra funding to cover that, whether it's from the commissioning authorities who are buying children's care homes, on the cheap in Lancashire, I might say, far cheaper than it is in their own areas? Is there any recourse there where we could get some money back via government or via those authorities? Just a thought.
Sadly, there are many areas of other organisations or individuals' actions that create police demand with no then recurrent bill for the demand that they've created, because it is a free-for service. There is no mechanism to withdraw, to recoup that kind of funding and allocate that, sadly. And I think it's conversations that happen in local areas. We know that we have, for example, high concentrations of HMOs. There are many other organisations beyond just the Children in Care, the probation service, often release lots of people into high HMO concentration areas, which creates multiple issues that are ongoing. And the constabulary have those discussions with those agencies. Some of those do have funding to help try and address the consequences of that. Some do, some don't. Some are willing to engage with the police, some are not, sadly.
I mean, with the HMO at least, you get some council tax in.
Yeah.
Children's home, they're exempt.
Yeah. It is a very, very important issue, and I wish I had a magic answer for.
Thank you. Randy.
Thank you. At paragraph 9 of the report, you talk about the fact that the business planning programme delivering savings is actually going to look at equality impact assessments for each of those review areas. Equality impact assessments can be a bit of an afterthought. How extensively are you using them through all of the other areas, and where are they available to review and to look at?
Thank you very much. Yeah, they are absolutely central to making sure that any change that we make, whether it either be an investment actually equally, because actually sometimes just changing the model, even when you think it's a good thing, doesn't necessarily produce unplanned consequences from people from different backgrounds and different disabilities. In terms of where they can be viewed, I shall turn to the monitoring officer for advice, guidance and enlightenment.
Thank you. The quality impact assessment will belong to the constabulary, so they won't belong to the PCC's office. They should be on the website, and if they're not, then we will have a conversation about that, but that's where I would expect to find them, on the website, Jeff.
Just thinking about Donald Rumsfeld's unknown unknowns, if I don't know how many equality impact assessments are being done and what they're being done about, how do I know where to find them? Might that be something to raise with the constabulary and ask if they could think about how to make that? Yeah,
I'm sure that there will be, the equality impact assessments will have been done by constabulary in relation to their budget planning processes. They have a new number of boards that are available and have a change board and deliver reviews in relation to each particular area that they're going to make changes in. And part and parcel of that process, there will have been an equality impact assessment. But yeah, I understand the point that you're making in terms of them being public in nature. But yeah, I'll take that back. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dowling.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Commissioner. Just a quick question. I'm sure it's set out in the report and is quite comprehensive and at points complex. Will residents see extra police officers as a result of us agreeing to raise the precept?
Yes.
Thank you.
Excellent. Right. Councillor Berry.
Or was it cast iron guarantees? Was that in the fashion once over?
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to record that I'm pleased that there is continued investment in neighbourhood policing teams and the ASB hotspot programme, because and that I hope that they can be spread into other areas that haven't seen the benefits of this, because I know in Wyre we have seen the benefits of it, and it's been well received by the community and embedded community policing. So as far as I'm concerned, I think the last few years, all right, we've seen some increase in, towards the precept, but I think it has been well spent and has increased not only the perception of the public, but also I think that the police are far more encouraged themselves, the officers on the beat that I've spoken to, more encouraged by the feeling in the police that they are moving forward. And I think it's been a great thing what has happened in the last couple of years with the assistance of the Chief Constable, of course. And in particular, I'd just like to mention the work that's been done to fight organised crime. We all have organised crime in our areas, and I think the rooting out of this must continue. And as far as I'm concerned, the spending the increases that we've had to pay for, the money has been well spent and greatly appreciated, I think, by a lot of people, certainly in Wyre.
But not appreciated by the organised crime gang members, of which 1,200, much over 1,200 have landed in the back of Lancashire constabulary vans in the last year.
So I don't have anybody else outstanding to ask questions. I think that was quite a robust discussion. Does anybody have any other points to raise? Okay, so we need to go to look at the recommendations. So the first one, note the details of the 24-25 provisional police finance settlement, cost pressures and investments, and the impact on Lancashire's budget. Consider the Commissioner's proposal to increase the council tax precept by £11.95 for a Band D property. Make arrangements to ensure that a formal written response to the proposals is sent to the Commissioner by the 8th of February, and then to note the draft capital investment programme and note the position of the Commissioner's reserves in 2024 and future years. So, are we happy to take all those recommendations as well? In which case, could we have a vote? Do we support the recommendations? All in favour? Anyone against? Thank you. That's clearly carried. Sorry, abstentions? Do we have any abstentions? Two abstentions. Thank you. Okay, because we have to put the formal written response to the proposals, would anyone like to make any comments to go forward with the written response? I think, I mean, yeah, Councillor Downey.
I think just the briefest comments of a lot of the comments that have been made, that the pain for financing the police shouldn't keep falling on residents. And I think, apologise, I can't remember whether it was Councillor Whip or Councillor Townsend who made the point that basically the government are saying we're making tax cuts in one area while forcing council tax increases on the police and councils, which baffles me because obviously all the money that government are funding is our taxes. So it's just moving one tax to the other, and I think that needs to be made clear. I've steered clear of making political attacks in this committee over my time or in this panel, despite others having done so previously under a Labour Commissioner. But the point is the government needs to be funding whatever government and whatever colour that government is, whatever colour the Commissioner is. The government need to fund it, and we need our Commissioner to keep pushing that as much as possible. And I think you have in the past, but we need to keep pushing back.
I am all in favour of a simplification of the tax and funding system, and I would be more than happy to write to the Treasury on that basis.
Any more comments to go forward? So Assad's confirmed that the majority is within the majority that's needed. So subject to those comments, yeah. And I think it's reasonable to say that there are some concerns, and that next year people will be really examining the actions on the budgets, assuming that we're all still here. And I think that's really important. So it would be really useful, I think, if it was the same committee, actually, that met next year. I think that's really important to have some consistency in the committee. So the recommendation's gone forward, and I think Assad saying...
That report's gone through, and it's just to say what we need in that next meeting.
I shall break the news to Mrs Snowden.
Yes. Okay, so the meeting...
She probably already is now.
So the meeting on the 14th of February won't be taking place. Okay, so I think that's the whole agenda, isn't it? Yep, date of next meeting, which will be confirmed on the minute.
4th of March.
4th of March. 4th of March.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody.